His sentencing didn't go far enough to address the atrocities and the crimes that he committed against the children.
Tonight, 5 years in prison for stealing money from youth in care.
As a homicide investigation, we believe that Megan is with the grandparents. And they're supporting each other.
Plus, the family of Megan Gallagher believes she is at rest with her ancestors.
In this place, I want to tell you how very sorry I am and to ask for forgiveness for the evil perpetrated by not a few Catholics.
And Pope Francis ends his week-long apology tour in the Arctic. Good evening, Tanse, and welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. Iqaluit has hosted many famous people. Nelson Mandela has greeted Inuit at the airport fence. Queen Elizabeth touched down to celebrate the birth of the territory. But on Friday afternoon, Pope Francis arrived to deliver an apology. He drew a crowd, and APTN News was in that crowd. Kent Driscoll reports from Iqaluit.
Pope Francis may be the spiritual leader of 1.3 billion Catholics, but even that fact can't stop the basketball games at the Nakasuk School in Iqaluit. While the crowd waited for the pontiff, he was landing in Iqaluit, about to be greeted by a local political who's who and residential school survivors. The meetings with those survivors put the Pope about an hour behind schedule, but the crowd waited. One of the people on site to help those survivors is someone who could have been in the political lineup. Alyssa Pichu-Tiapik is former mayor of Iqaluit and a former cabinet minister of the territorial government. She was volunteering to help people having a difficult time with the Pope's appearance.
It's because of residential school and the horrific history. And I think this is an international milestone where we're finally being acknowledged for that. And to me, why not come out and celebrate the survivors and the people who have survived, because it's intergenerational.
Orange was the color of the day, from the dignitaries to the public who came to see the Pope. There were a few protesters who opted to stay silent and be seen. Bishop Anthony Krokti is Nunavut's highest-ranking church official. His hope for the day was the same as many in the crowd.
All of us are looking for something, some hope, joy, and I guess the new things in life, because we are very often stuck within ourselves. Memory, and it could be anything.
Memory was a strong part of the day. So was a celebration of Inuit culture. The Pope was greeted by music and performance that you can only find in Inuit Nunanga.
How will you be remembered by what is left behind when you think of me?
And then it was the Pope's turn to address the crowd. He thanked them for being there, speaking in Spanish. Here's his English interpreter with the translation.
This only renewed in me the indignation and shame that I have felt for months. Today, too, in this place, I want to tell you how very sorry I am and to ask for forgiveness for the evil perpetrated by not a few Catholics.
It was a quick visit to the Nunavut capital, but one that brought out a crowd. Now, Nunavut residents have heard from the pontiff directly, and he has heard from them. A part of Nunavut joined Pope Francis for his trip back to Rome. And now we all get to see what a difference meeting the people you're apologizing to can make. Kent Driscoll, APTN National News, Iqaluit.
On the way back to Rome from Iqaluit, Canadian press reporter Brittany Hobson had a very interesting conversation with Pope Francis. She joins us now to share what some of that conversation entailed. Brittany, thanks so much for joining us, and it's always good to see you and hear from you.
Thanks, Daryl. Thanks for having me on.
So, what did Pope Francis say to you on the plane back to Rome?
So on the plane, he gave his normal end press conference. He normally does this with all the journalists that are involved. So the Canadian journalists on the plane got to ask two questions. And so the question that I had asked is, did he consider what happened to Indigenous peoples during the residential school era genocide, and did the church take part in genocide? And so he was just very straightforward with his response to say that, yes, it was genocide. He did note that he didn't use that word. He said it was a technical term and he didn't think to use it, but that it was genocide and that what he was describing was genocide. And that's what we had heard too in his apologies. The things that he was describing, like cultural assimilation, the taking of languages, things like that, that it's, these are genocidal acts. He just did not use the word genocide. And I heard from a lot of survivors that they were really looking for him to use that word. And so he was totally upfront and said that, yes, what happened was genocide.
So, Brittany, what's the reaction been like since he said those words?
So it slowly started to trickle in. I've seen just on social media alone, lots of people, I don't want to say happy, but impressed maybe that he used that word and that he admitted that it was genocide. Some Indigenous leaders have come out and said that they appreciate him calling it essentially what it was or what it is. A lot of people, though, were kind of upset or disappointed that he didn't use that word during his apologies. They would have liked to have heard that word on Canadian soil instead of up in the air. I think the overall reaction is favorable, and there's now been a push for the federal government to recognize that it was genocide.
Okay, so what are some of the implications maybe, of this word coming from the Pope himself?
I'm not sure if there's any sort of legal implications per se, but there certainly is implications that now that the Pope has said it, one part of who was part of this residential school era and who was inflicting the pain on Indigenous people, that now the federal government needs to step up. NDP MP Leah Gazan, last year when the graves were uncovered in Kamloops, she had presented a motion to have it recognized as genocide. And that needed unanimous support, and it didn't go through the House of Commons. She's kind of, re-upping that plea to her colleagues, her federal colleagues, that this needs to be recognized as genocide. So I think there's going to be this push now for the federal government to really recognize that and say those words. We heard from the TRC that it was cultural genocide. There was reasons for that at the time. It's shifted now, and really the federal government, at least from what I'm hearing, needs to step up and call it genocide.
All right, Brittany, we'll have to leave it there, but certainly appreciate you taking a few minutes out of your day. And again, it's great to see you and hear from you.
Miigwech, thanks for having me on.
It was nice to see Brittany Hobson again. She now works for the Canadian Press and was speaking to us from Rome. Of course, Brittany used to work for us here at APTN National News. All right, we need to step aside for a short break. Stay with us. More news when we come back. Welcome back to Saskatoon now, where the father of Megan Gallagher thanked those he called heroes for stepping up. Brian Gallagher says it was thanks to some people who came forward, making possible the arrest of a fourth suspect in his daughter's death. APTN's Leanne Sanders has more.
The next step is, we hope, to find some way to bring Megan home.
Brian Gallagher says the accused in the homicide in their daughter's death need to do the right thing. RCMP arrested 44-year-old John Wayne Sanderson Wednesday on James Smith Cree Nation in northeast Saskatchewan after an apparent tip from the public. He made his first court appearance by video Thursday morning. Sanderson is one of 4 people now charged with offering an indignity to human remains. Speaking outside Saskatoon Provincial Court, where another of the accused was making an appearance, Brian Gallagher said there was a brief sense of relief at Sanderson's arrest.
Thank you for breaking the silence, and I've talked about the silence forever and ever as long as this has been going on, and it is the big thing that is really doing the most damage to us and to a number of other families. It literally is killing us.
Megan Gallagher went missing in the fall of 2020 in Saskatoon, and in January 2021, police declared the case was now a homicide investigation. Brian says, in spite of the latest arrest, there will never be resolution for them.
As a homicide investigation, we believe that Megan is with the grandparents. And they're supporting each other.
Family and advocates for the missing and murdered consistently supported the Gallaghers at the court appearances of 44-year-old Roderick William Sutherland, 42-year-old Jessica Sutherland, and 41-year-old Ernest Whitehead. Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations Vice Chief Heather Bear made a plea to anyone who knows anything.
Give back Megan's dignity. Bring her home. You can give something back here. Give her back and you'll give back some dignity.
Bear says the violence against women has got to stop. Leanne Sanders, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
The FSIN says the past week has been difficult with no sleep for many members. Its executive operating officer, 48-year-old Don Walker, has not been seen since July 22nd in Saskatoon. Police are asking the public to check for surveillance or dash cam video from a park south of the city. Her 7-year-old son is also missing. A large-scale search has been underway at the river near a park south of Saskatoon, where her truck and some personal belongings were found. A candlelight vigil was held in late July. Treaty Commissioner Mary Culbertson is a friend of Walker's.
This doesn't happen to us. We serve the people. And then it happens to us. And we can't say that things are getting so much better for our missing and murdered women and kids, because they're not.
The sex assault trial against Indigenous leader Ed John began a week ago Monday in Prince George, BC. Now John is free to go as the charges were stayed. 71-year-old John was facing 4 charges of sexual assault dating back to 1974. He pled not guilty. In a statement, BC Prosecution Service said charges were stayed because the likelihood of a conviction could not be met. The decision came after the defense counsel's cross-examination of an accuser of John brought the case to a halt because of inconsistencies in her testimony. Ed John is a lawyer and hereditary chief of Tulasdan Nation. He is a former BC cabinet minister as well. Former BC social worker Robert Riley Saunders was sentenced to 5 years in prison for defrauding primarily Indigenous youth. BC First Nation leaders say that's not enough. Saunders was arrested in 2020 and accused of misusing over $450,000 while working in Kelowna. He was charged with fraud, theft, and forgery, and using a fake degree from the University of Manitoba on his resume. A separate class action lawsuit with the BC government was reached last year. They will pay $15 million in compensation to more than 100 victims. In a press release, the First Nations Leadership Council say they are disappointed in the length of Saunders' sentencing.
His sentencing didn't go far enough to address the atrocities and the crimes that he committed against the children that he was supposed to be responsible for. In particular, we understand that one of the youth that he had swindled, I guess, actually has passed away.
Last month, Indigenous leaders in British Columbia called for a public inquiry into the role the RCMP played in the death of a First Nation father. The union representing RCMP officers labeled remarks by the Indigenous leaders as inflammatory and harmful. Williams Lake First Nation stand by their calls for changes in policing. APTN's Lee Wilson reports.
Last month, the family of Rojan Alphonse made a distress call to the RCMP. According to the Independent Investigation Office, the police oversight body, officers responded to calls of a man in distress and in possession of weapons. The RCMP sent their emergency response team. Alphonse died by suicide hours later. Indigenous leaders held a press conference in support of the family and called for a public inquiry into the role of the RCMP, alleging the heavily armed response was an escalation. Chief Willie Sellers of Williams Lake First Nation says they want to find answers and need more information.
In the best interests of our community and our people and the family that was directly impacted, that we, reach out and we make the statement, demand a public inquiry because of the significance of what happened. Could this man have been saved? That's what we're leaning towards, but we need more information.
Last week, the National Police Federation, the union that represents RCMP nationally, released a public statement calling their statements inflammatory. We are aware of and concerned by inflammatory and potentially harmful statements made to the media that we believe create unnecessary risk for members and the public by escalating tensions in communities where members serve and live. We respect and support the ongoing investigation by the BC Independent Investigation Office and ask that all parties refrain from presupposing or attempting to influence the outcome in conclusion. Chief Sellers says the RCMP response to their calls for a public inquiry are an example of a systemic problem Indigenous communities face with policing. He added that the relationship with the RCMP has improved, but it's not happening fast enough.
Give opportunity to these entities to come to the table and have dialogue and have discussion and educate ourselves. And, it's just not happening quick enough. That being said, we need to continue to build this relationship with the RCMP and get to a place where we do feel comfortable and confident in the services that are being provided to our communities.
Williams Lake First Nation stated there is a need for a major shift in policing across the country. They will continue to stand with the family of Rojan Alphonse, a father of 4 from their nation.
There's a major paradigm shift in our approach to policing that we need to see in this country. And, the legacy of the late Rojan Alphonse is a way that we're going to do that. And if we could stand behind and support this family in their time of need and time of healing and finding the truth, we will do that.
Lee Wilson, APTN National News, Kitimat.
All right, it's time for one final break. Stay with us. Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. This was sent in by Chris LaRock. Chris says this extremely unique looking sculpture is located at Spanish, Ontario, located west of Sudbury. And we would like to know more about that tree. That is very interesting. Send your photos to share@aptn.ca for the chance to be our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting in the east, 24 and rain in St. John's and 24 in Charlottetown. 23 in a mix of sun and cloud in Happy Valley, Goose Bay, and 22 in Cartwright. 25 and clear in Quebec City, and 22 in showers in Val-d'Or. 34 degrees and some showers in Windsor, and 21 and rain in North Bay. 24 and rain in Timmins, and more rain in 17 in Big Trout Lake. Some showers in 15 in Churchill, and 19 and clear in Norway House. Some showers in 21 in Barons River, and 23 and rain in Winnipeg. Mix of sun and cloud, and 25 in Regina, and 23 in North Battleford. 19 degrees in La Ronge, and 18 in Stony Rapids. Moving to the west, some more showers, and 19 in Fort Chippewa, and 19 in Peace River. 20 degrees in Edmonton, and 24 in Calgary. 17 and some rain in Tofino, and 20 in Quesnel. 15 in showers in Prince Rupert, and 15 in showers in Fort Nelson. 19 in a mix of sun and cloud in Whitehorse, and 19 in Old Crow. 22 in Wrigley, and 19 in Yellowknife. 20 degrees and clear in Nunavut, and 21 in Fort McPherson. 14 and some showers in Baker Lake, and 13 in Cambridge Bay. 9 degrees in Resolute, and 17 in Iqaluit. An Algonquin-led moose research project is currently underway. It came out of the efforts to protect the moose population in the traditional territory of the Barrier Lake First Nation in Quebec. But the intent is to include the opinions and knowledge of all Algonquin communities everywhere. Annette Francis caught up with the research group in an Ontario Algonquin First Nation.
The other ones would say, stay away from shooting the cow for certain periods of years. Those are some ways of how...
Shannon Chief has been a longtime protector of the moose population.
It's amazing how much knowledge our people have. And when you combine everything that they have to share, what they observe of their territories, what are their struggles, we're all having the same struggle, the same concern for the moose and all that. We all want to do something to protect the moose population.
2 years ago, Chief stood on the front lines in her traditional territory of Barrier Lake in Quebec to prevent hunters from killing moose for sport and calling for a pause in sport hunting due to a decline in moose numbers. That happened in the spring of 2021, with an agreement reached with the Quebec government to freeze hunting in the La Vérendrye Wildlife Reserve in Quebec. The 2-year period is to be used to study the state of the moose population.
We started in December last year, and then we had our first meeting back in April with just 4 committee members that I pulled in together, and then we just started working out a plan how this research will do, how it will benefit, also trying to take care of the traditional knowledge that we're going to every community.
So she's come 5 hours south to the Algonquin community of Pikwakanagan in Ontario. Chief wants to hear from all Algonquin communities. On Thursday, she met about a dozen members of Pikwakanagan. That included Amber Hine, who believes this meeting is important work.
Our land and our animals, they need our protection. And in today's Western society, there's so much extraction, so much take, and we used to live in a way that was very reciprocal, give and take. It wasn't just take.
Jerry LaValle says he's noticed a decline in moose over the years.
I would like to see the moose reach a state of where it would provide what it always did before for the Algonquin, and that was sustainability. Even though in the modern day world we do not actually need, but culturally it's necessary.
But Clifford Maness isn't so sure.
I think it's a matter of being in the right place at the right time. If I'm driving up the road and I say moose, he's usually gone for the next guy behind me. They don't see him. It's just, So how do you determine the numbers?
According to Chief, the final report from this research will be complete by October. It will be used to extend the moratorium on moose sport hunting before it ends next year. Annette Francis, APTN National News, Pikwakanagan.
All right, that's all we have for you tonight on APTN National News. For news anytime, visit our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Daryl Stranger. Thank you for joining us. Miigwech, and have a great night.